The first episode of each season is usually the most important one, as it sets up the events of what's to come later down the line. Later down the line. Um, but some do so better than others. There are two factors for which I came to these results in this ranking video. One, how much did I enjoy the episode? And two, there was usually the first episode gives us a main idea. You know how in English, where you have a main idea and there's details listed? Well, how much is the main idea pushed, essentially? What's the main idea, and how much is it emphasized throughout the course of the episode? That's the other factor that I'm looking for. But with all that out of the way, I'm Linked and Android, and here's my ranking of all the 16 premiere episodes. Infamous. You probably already knew this was going to be at the bottom since, well, I put it at number 1 on my worst episodes ranking video. But basically, this episode, it does introduce a main point, which was Klaus is back and he's going to Styx, and the ninja have to figure out why he's going to Styx. But it feels like they got distracted from that point because there was the whole going to the hospital for Lil Nelson, and there was, the whole what do you mean by we scene that basically overshadows this scene. And to top it all off, there's the infamous, no pun intended, prison arc. So the point was there, they just didn't really emphasize on that point because of the other things that were going on in this episode, some of which were not even that well written, honestly. But that's why it ends up at the bottom of today's list. Rise of the Snakes. Now, you might be surprised that I put a Season 1 episode, a season from my favorite Ninjago season of all time, towards the bottom. Hear me out. As much as I love this season, and as much as I like this episode, the main point it came across was kind of weird. And the main point was that, basically, it's hard to explain, but it's basically Lloyd, they thought that, they were gonna face Lord Garmadon again, but it's Lloyd Garmadon. Honestly, I feel like this episode didn't really even have a point, honestly. It just kinda did things willy-nilly, which is understandable since this is one of the first episodes of the entire series. And this would be okay if I made this list like years ago, but honestly, I feel that now when I look back on it, it didn't really introduce the stuff very well. I remember talking to some people on YouTube saying, oh, the first few seasons didn't really set off a good impression. And with the next entry, I actually think that these people might be right. Darkness Shall Rise. So the main point in this episode is they have to train Lloyd. The ninja have to train Lloyd, but they don't have the money or the space to do it, to properly train him to be the Green Ninja. So they basically get jobs in order to pay for the money. Understandable, but the problem with this is that there's 4 different jobs when I feel like they could have had like 1 or 2 jobs for that. They didn't. I feel like the idea of 4 jobs, it kind of makes the whole point, in a sense, be a little weird. It makes the whole emphasizing the point a little too much, essentially. And after that, especially when they all get fired, it's kind of like, well... And to top it all off, there's this weird battle towards the end, which further distracts from the main point being told in this episode and throughout the course of the season. It just didn't really do it all that well. And I still think these episodes are good. This is just me, what I think as a premiere. Just to get that straight. This is not a episode preference list. This is a premiere episode list. The Mask of Deception. Yeah, I know, a lot of people are gonna give me crap for placing a Season 8 episode. How dare I? How dare I put a Season 8 episode towards the bottom of a ranking list that I have an opinion on? How dare I for having an opinion about Season 8 that is drastically different from everyone else? But anyways, the main point of this season doesn't get introduced until around halfway through the episode, which is there's this new group called the Sons of Garmadon, and they have to protect the royal family, which, you know, just kind of randomly comes in. Yes, there is, you know, proof that kind of retcons this, but it's not even that good, honestly. And honestly, up until after the whole test, I don't even know if this was considered a test to see if they are worthy of the royal family's trust, with that whole firecracker situation. But after that, the whole point, the main point, is just thrown out the window, essentially. It honestly makes me feel like you could sum up the entire episode within the span of 5 minutes from just that scene of the test with the firecrackers. And while that may not necessarily be a bad thing, the fact that it's only like 5 minutes out of a 22-minute episode, that's not a very good ratio. You should bring the point from immediately as you start the episode, and further emphasize on that point throughout the episode. That's why it ends up pretty low on this list. You have reached level 13. Would you like to enter Prime Empire? Sorry for my low class impression of that game dude from Prime Empire. But anyways, the main point in this episode is basically it's introduced halfway through the episode, which is never a good idea. Which is basically, once the mechanic is defeated, they have to go scour through his hideout to find any sort of incriminating stuff. And then a much bigger problem, another big problem, is they don't further emphasize on the point until the very last moments of the episode. Like, I understand if they wanted to leave like a lasting impression, and they got it really well, but the point is that you don't really do that because people might not understand what the point is if you don't emphasize it until later. So I guess it's one of those bittersweet kind of ones where it worked, but it also didn't work at the same time. I don't know. That's just what the vibe that I came off from it. Uncharted. Uncharted's main point is that Misako, Wu, Clutch Powers, and his assistant Dwayne basically went on an expedition, but are somehow missing. Oh no, what are we going to do? And Lloyd and the ninja must find a way to get her back, to find her and get her back. So the main point was introduced almost immediately. Great sign. But then there comes the big distraction. Twitchy Tim. As much as I think Twitchy Tim is an underrated side character, he does distract from the main point with his and constantly repetition of himself. He doesn't really try and add or emphasize the main point, but rather distract from it. And because of that, it kind of makes you forget what the actual point of the episode even is, because he kind of distracts you from that point, and the fact that this point wasn't even really mentioned that much throughout the entirety of the episode, besides the beginning, obviously, further proves this. So while I still think it's a okay-ish premiere, it definitely does not compare with the others on this list. Shintaro. Shintaro's main point is the ninja are invited to Princess Vanya's birthday party in the Ivory City of Shintaro. At least I think that's what the full name of the place is. That's one of the points there. But that isn't really... But like some of the other ones on this list, they don't really emphasize the point until around halfway through. Because at first the ninja are just doing random chores and just chilling like the villains. And, well, that's fine and whatnot. I wish they could have emphasized that point a lot sooner. And then there was the whole Woof's I'm getting too old for this little funk thing, which doesn't really distract it from the main point, but does emphasize it. However, it doesn't really add all that much to it. And then there was that whole weird scene with the dire bats, which, you know, I wouldn't say it's distracting, but it does feel like a weird addition to the main point. And then there's the flying people. I forgot the people's names. The one with Hailmar, the guards, the royal guards, essentially. They come and save the ninja, which, you know, does help that they are from Shintaro. It does help. So it does help further emphasize the point. So I think this premiere is good or okay, but it just has very weird ways of emphasizing its points. Wasted true potential. You might be thinking, what the fuck kind of stuff are you on, Lou? Don't you hate this episode? I do. I don't like this episode. But remember, this is not an episode preference list. This is a premiere list. And the main point of this episode, the main idea, is the ninja are fat and lazy, and Wu must teach them how to sharpen up and get their ninja skills back. And I really like that. I really like that part about the episode. It does introduce it fairly early into the episode, around, I think, maybe 3 to 4 minutes in. And I loved how this point is emphasized throughout the entirety of that episode. I wish it was introduced from the first thing onwards, but I'll take what I can get. Even though the one thing that's holding this episode, this premiere back, is, personally, I'm not a big fan of this episode, like I mentioned earlier. The enjoyment of the episode is really important to me, and if I enjoyed both this episode a lot more, it would have been higher than what it placed here. The Darkness Comes. This episode's main point is that there are these villains called the Bringers of Doom that might be coming to Ninjago, which was first introduced, obviously, in one of the earlier parts of the episode by Garmadon. And honestly, it feels like they kind of forgot about it for a little bit, then started to remember it, and then it picks up from there, which is really good, especially with the scene where basically the Oni clouds are just turning people to stone, like Medusa, if you know your Greek mythology. And while it was good in that aspect, I love that. That period of time where they sort of forget about that is a little awkward. It's a little awkward, and it definitely can make the viewer think that they might forget what the main point is, especially if they don't watch it from the very beginning. They might accidentally watch it from, like, the point where Zane, Cole, and Pixel are getting the new bounty, or Jay is practicing his proposal to Nia by practicing on Kai. So they might get confused with that. But other than that, I think it's a solid premiere nonetheless. a big splash. This is the most recent premiere episode, and I still think it's pretty good. The main point of this episode is Nia's powers are going awry somehow, some way, and this is introduced almost immediately within this episode, which is great. And they further emphasized it by showcasing how because of this event, it's making all the ninja basically make her wary of her and what will happen, essentially. And I really love that aspect about the episode, how it actually further emphasized it by showcasing how they are reacting to this situation. And it makes Nia want to try and be better. And I really like the ending where, Maya and Ray come back, because Maya, being the previous master of water, may find a solution. And I thought that was a really pretty good ending. So this is from here on until the beginning, till the number 1, we're actually entering good premieres. These ones did everything mostly correct. Firstborn. This episode title, though, is pretty clickbait, but I'm not here to talk about the title. But this episode's main point is it actually has 2 main points, because of it being 2 different storylines. And the first one, with the Resistance, is Lloyd is struggling to get back on his feet after the events of Season 8's finale. And you gotta feel with Lloyd. You feel with Lloyd and Nia's struggle without that. That's what makes this interesting Resistance plot so good. Because they just do it so well. If this entire episode was entirely focused on the Resistance plot, it'd probably get a 9 or even a 10 out of me. But it still got a solid score for me nonetheless. Also, you gotta give some quality points to Sam Vincent's acting. It's really good in this episode. But the one thing that's holding this episode back is the First Realm storyline. The First Realm storyline kind of hits off on a very weird start, because it first involves them just scavenging with what they have, and Jay basically being high on drugs. Let's be honest here. He was high on drugs. I don't care what you say. And then there's the whole Cole and Wu moments, which was nice and whatnot. And then, there's the ending, obviously, which is kind of a little morbid, if you ask me, especially with the overshot view of the Ultra Dragon. Damn you, Iron Baron! But anyway, because of the First Realm being sort of wishy-washy with what it was trying to say, it's kind of holding this premiere back from potentially reaching into the top 5. Oh boy, you're gonna hate me for this one. Winds of Change. Now, you might be thinking, Luke, wasn't this your favorite premiere at one point? Why is it down here at number 5? Hear me out. I love this episode. It's one of my personal favorites. But the main point of this episode is not introduced until halfway through the episode, which in my opinion, you should not be doing that. But here's the thing. Once it introduces that main point, that second from everywhere from that point onwards is perfection. I would not change that second half of the episode. The first half, though, does need some changes. Because all we're left, basically, is just that water fish chase. And some pretty sweet moments with Kai and Lloyd. And, there's the whole steep wisdom thing, which is kind of weird. But once you get past those, it's really good. It's really good. It emphasizes the point extremely well, and you get a sweet-ass fight between the ninja and Moro, even if it is one-sided. The Hands of Time. This premiere is very underrated, if I say so myself. And it gets to the point basically immediately, which is an old foe from Wu's past has come to finish what they once started. In this case, Acronix. And I love that it was basically introduced not even 2 minutes into the episode. And while there are some scenes that somewhat distract from the main point, most of the time it does focus on the battle between Wu and Acronix, which emphasizes the point further, which is awesome, by the way. Season 7 really nailed their action sequences. And the whole investigation with, what's the cause of the, that little time skip further emphasized it further. And even the scenes with Misako, Ronan, and Dareth, the first one was a little off-putting, but once that time skip happened, it also helped along with the scene, which I thought was really, really good and really, really well done. And the ending as well basically was the cherry on top. I don't know what they could have done to make it a little bit better, but I feel like if they tweaked it a little bit, modified it a bit, it could have been really well and potentially even perfect. The Surge. This is definitely an underrated premiere, as a lot of people that I know put it at like number 7 or number 8, when it should be this high. I mean, the main point, the only thing that's holding it back, and this is very minor to me, is that they didn't further emphasize the main point until 3/4 of the way through the episode, which is the Overlord comes back to get his revenge on Lloyd for the events of the Season 2 finale. Other than that, though, it did everything pretty much perfection. The action sequences were amazing, and this episode was so hyped up because it was the return of Ninjago after the original cancellation back in 2012 after the Season 2 finale. And oh boy, what an episode to start off this new Ninjago period. Way of the Ninja. Of course, how could I not include the first episode? Now, you might be thinking, Luke, there's only 2 episodes in the pilots, so wouldn't it be kind of cheating? Well, not everyone watched it for 2 episodes. Some people watched it in 4, and up until recently, I heard some countries even aired it as a special. So, whenever you watch it, I'm just doing it from what I've seen, and that was the 2-episode format. So, basically, and it's the first episode of Ninjago that introduced us to the entire world of Ninjago. It didn't necessarily have a main point, but it didn't need to. It was the first episode, so I can let it slide, obviously. But what it did, how much it set up, was so great that it set up basically the most successful original LEGO IP, and potentially the most successful LEGO theme that LEGO has ever created. And it's still running over 10 years later. The Invitation. You probably knew this was going to be number 1, since everyone almost puts this one at number 1, and so do I. The way they handled this episode was so beyond perfect. And I can't say that about a lot of Ninjago episodes, but this one, I can absolutely say for sure that this episode was basically beyond perfection. There's nothing, absolutely nothing I would change about this episode. The main point of the episode is that after the loss of Zane, the ninja are basically disbanded, and then it doesn't really need a main point other than the ninja are disbanded, because the showcase of emotions that went through this episode, dealing with the loss of a friend, this really hit me. And it hits me harder because, as you all recently knew, one of my family members recently passed due to them committing suicide. So it kind of hurts me even more how relatable this episode is. This might be one of, if not the most relatable episodes of the entire series. And you can't capture magic like this stuff ever again. I don't know if Wild Brain can capture this stuff. They've came incredibly close. Like, for example, the Turn of the Tide episode. There's Niad as well. But there's something about the old episodes that capture this magic that just stick with me. There's something about them that just stick with me. But anyways, what do you guys think? What is your ranking of all the premiere episodes of Ninjago? Let me know in the comments down below. But anyways, I hope you guys liked this video. Give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the show by clicking on the red subscribe button. And click on the notification bell to see every video that I will upload. And I'll see all you folks in the next video. Bye-bye!